We had a great response to our public meeting, and now I'm going to answer with a few of my colleagues some of the questions that have been sent in. This question is about car parking at Willen Lake and the Parks Trust's relationship with the car parking operator Napier Parking. Willen Lake is our busiest park, as you all know, and the number of cars parking there grows each year. I think last year we had over 100,000 cars parked there, and over the last 3 years we've had nearly 500,000 cars parking at Willen Lake. And yes, we do occasionally get complaints, but there aren't a huge number in proportion to the number of cars that park there. And we've got confidence in our parking operator, Napier, to handle those complaints equitably and fairly, and that they do. They have a code of conduct, they have an appeals process, they're members of a a European Parking Association, and they follow the published guidelines. The car parking income is really essential for us. It's a key part of our income, our biggest source of income at Willen Lake. And you know, it costs a lot of money to run Willen Lake. The previous weekend we collected 5 tons of litter in one weekend, and that costs a lot to dispose of. And it's not just litter, it's all the other things that we do there at Willen Lake. And we have been investing, and we're continuing to invest in the facilities there. So the new car park that we put in a couple of years ago, you might remember that a lot of the car parking was on grass. We've now got a properly drained car park, tarmac car park. We've got new toilet facilities, we've got new play equipment, we've got splash and play, and right now we're investing in a new water sports centre and cafe and restaurant that is going to be a fabulous addition to our facilities, along with a big extension to the play area. And all this, of course, costs money. Our only real source of money is from our investments and from the income that we generate on site. So we think car parking is a fair way to generate income, and it's a very important part of our business strategy, if you like. So we've got confidence in our operator. We're sorry if you've got complaints and you've had issues down there, but we like to think, and I hope, that they are always resolved fairly and equitably by Napier.
One of the questions that we had sent in was about our interpretation panels in the parks, and this one related to the brick kilns. So an update on this is that we are actually looking at a programme of work at the moment to update the information boards that you see in the parks, particularly the historic panels that are often on the stone plinths, which is the example that was mentioned at the brick kilns. There are a number that need updating across the parkland, and you may see a few are missing because of their age. We've had to take them away. So we will be looking at the most urgent ones first, and we will then roll out a programme that gradually updates those across the parks. So you can look forward to seeing those updates in the near future. Thank you.
Right, we've had a question about why is it our policy to remove 90% of trees or shrubs when we're doing a thinning or tree removal exercise. We actually haven't got a policy where we remove 90% of trees or shrubs. That's almost like clear felling. There is a need to do thinning and tree removals, but the figures are a lot closer to 30% generally. Sometimes a little bit higher, sometimes a little bit lower. One of the challenges that we face in Milton Keynes is the initial planting was heavily overstocked, and the trees and shrubs went in at sometimes at 5 to the square metre, which was great for this instant green effect that they wanted. They wanted to green up what was probably the biggest boom site in Europe at the time, but in the long term not sustainable. As these trees grow up, they all compete for the light, putting all their strength going skywards, but actually no strength, so eventually it'll all fall over. So we go out and we carry out these things, and this allows us to select the best trees for the long-term retention. Trees with good form, trees with good shape, a diversity of trees. And it allows us to take out the weak ones, perhaps those are diseased, those that are now inappropriate to a location, perhaps grown too tall, close to garden boundaries, etc. The added advantage of doing this work is it also allows the understory to develop. So all those shrubs underneath have suddenly got the light where they can grow and develop, the ground flora, all the wildflower, etc. And this is also a great benefit for the wildlife. So although at the time it may look quite a disturbance, in the long term it actually produces a better environment.
We've been asked a question about our use of electric vehicles for our fleet of vehicles. And obviously this is coming from the angle about the carbon emissions that the Trust makes as we maintain the parks around the city. We've got a fleet of about 25 vehicles that we use either for our direct works teams, so they're trucks that take the tree work equipment out and around the city, or that our community rangers use to drive around the city. At the moment we have invested in 4 electric vehicles. You might see them as you travel around the city. They have the Parks Trust livery on them. We will be doing more of this in future. At the moment our fleet of petrol and diesel vehicles are all in good condition. We think it's important to use the vehicles that we have already rather than just go out and replace the fleet with a whole new set, which in itself isn't really environmentally friendly. But as each vehicle comes to its end of serviceable life, we will be replacing that. And as much as possible, we will be switching the fleet over to electric vehicles in future.
This next question is from one of our volunteers who actually asked this question at last year's annual public meeting, and he's not happy that we've not followed it up, and really he would like to see us organise a proactive joined up action plan to deal with the issue of litter. And I take his point. Littering is a really big problem for us. It annoys the hell out of everybody. And it's not getting any better. But we just don't have the capability, the resources to be able to organise a campaign right across the whole city and to try and coordinate all the litter picking that goes on. We do a lot, our volunteers do a lot of litter picking, but there are a lot of people who just do it off their own back, and that's great. There are some really good community initiatives and gangs of people going out collecting litter, not necessarily just from our parks, but from the canal or from council-owned land or from areas around shops and local centres. So there's so much going on. If we were to try and coordinate all that and support that all, I think we would be setting ourselves up to fail. So it's just too big a job for us at the moment, but we are continuing to work away at the litter problem, and we're determined to try and find new ways and to crack it.
So we had a really important question sent in to us about accessibility across our parkland, and particularly from the perspective of wheelchair users and those with mobility issues. We have a couple of updates of work that we've been doing across the Trust in this area, one of which is at Willen Lake. Last year we commissioned an audit to be done through the Centre of Integrated Living in Milton Keynes. They did a fantastic audit for us of the site, looking at it from the eyes of those with mobility and accessibility issues, and gave us some considerations. We're really pleased to say that we've been able to take a number of those on board, and this has led to our improvement works, including a changing places facility, which I know is very welcomed by a number of people in the community, and we will also be making other adjustments to the site in line with the audit that was done for us. We're now looking at the rest of the parkland, and we'll be undertaking internal audits of all of our parks, and as part of that we will then update information on our website to help give information prior to your visits, so that you can see which are accessible routes, where you may come across any obstructions in the parks, and where rest points are. And we are also looking at developing some accessibly friendly walking routes and mobility routes as well.
We've had a couple of questions about antisocial behaviour in Campbell Park. And we are aware of antisocial behaviour in various areas of car park, particularly the Glebe roundabout car park area. And yeah, a difficult one. We do take action against it. We do intermittently close off the car park to try and disperse such behaviour. We also work with the police and request them to put more patrols in there, and we patrol the area ourselves. So it is something that is ongoing. We try to manage it as best we can. We can disrupt that behaviour, but we can't keep those car parks closed forever. So when we get on top of the issue and we feel we're on top of it, it can come back again. So it's something that we're constantly working ourselves, the police and other agencies. There's also been known that there's some drug taking in and around the park. Again, this is intermittent. It's usually associated with people travelling through the park rather than staying in the park. And again, these issues rise and drop. At the moment, everything's good and we haven't really got an issue at all. But we're always mindful that this could happen again and cause us issues in the future. But rest assured, working with other agencies, we do tackle this issue.
We've had a question about what's happening to the ponds at Great Linford Manor Park, and I expect that's because the person who sent the question has seen that we felled the trees, or some of the trees around the pond, in February this year. Well, the plan is to restore the ponds. They're a fantastic asset and feature in the park. We believe they date from the 18th century, and after 200 years they're showing quite a lot of deterioration. We're in the middle of a Heritage Lottery funded project, external grant funding to pay for the restoration of the park. We felled the trees around the pond in February this year to make sure we took the trees out during the dormant season. No nesting birds would be disturbed by doing the work then. And we're in the process of putting the finishing touches to the plan to appoint the contractor to come in and restore the ponds. The reason the trees had to go is that the roots of the trees have caused quite a lot of damage to the walls of the pond. The pond originally had limestone walls, which on the top pond, the circular pond, if you've ever been there to the park, you would have seen the circular pond. There's hardly any of that wall left, so we want to rebuild that wall, and we wouldn't be able to do that with the trees around the pond. Also, over the years, the trees have dropped an awful lot of leaf litter into the water, which has caused silting up. And if you go there in the summer, you would have noticed the smell as the silt was rotting down. So unfortunately, it does look a bit untidy there at the moment, but we're hoping later in the year we'll be able to get the contractor in and we'll start the restoration work on the ponds.
We had a question from a previous organiser of a fantastic event that used to take place in Campbell Park, which was the Filipino-British Festival. The organiser of this event asks us, "I was always told that as long as we did not charge entry to the festival, we could have the park itself for free, as it was an objective of the Parks Trust to help to welcome people into the parks and for them to benefit from the free access. We therefore did not charge entry or parking at this event. I now see that you're charging for parking at Willen Lake. How do you do this with such an objective, especially when I hear so many complaints about how this is operated?" So the reason we charge for car parking at Willen Lake and not in the rest of the parkland is that this is a commercial site for us. The volume and the level of business that's at Willen Lake and helping to keep up to the standard of the experience we wish customers to have on this site means that we need to drive a revenue income in to enable us as a charity to deliver that. We actually have 52 car parks across the parkland and we only charge at 4 of them, and this is to help to bring that revenue in. We also have other revenue streams, and as a charity we are funded through our property portfolio and our financial investments, and those are what helps us to be able to then not only keep up the standards of care that we have across the maintenance of parkland, but also to be able to offer community activities and events and to help to subsidise those to make sure that the parks are here for the benefit of all.
This next question is about the development that's planned at Tickford Fields up at Newport Pagnell, and the questioner points out that nearby there are some wonderful former gravel workings that have now colonised with some great flora and fauna, and wouldn't it be nice if they could be incorporated into that scheme? Well, we're not involved in Tickford Fields yet. We fully expect to be, because earlier this year the council determined that all new developments that were taking place on council land would be, the Parks Trust would be involved, and the green space would be handed over to the Parks Trust. So we're fully expecting to be involved at Tickford Fields, but at the moment we're not. But if we are, we're certainly, what we would be looking to do is to try and see how the existing green spaces could be connected into the new development. That's certainly a mantra of ours, and anywhere where we are involved, we're very, very keen to see that connectivity across all the green infrastructure in Milton Keynes.
We've had a couple of questions in about the vendors who operate in our parks, and whether we impose requirements upon them to either only sell environmentally friendly products, such as avoiding the use of single-use plastics, or whether we insist they only use electric vehicles, which is obviously more beneficial for the environment than fossil fueled vehicles. We don't currently set strict requirements for that at the moment. However, we do set quality criteria. All of those vendors have to tender for the opportunity to sell goods in our parks. And as we set those criteria, we do state a preference for environmentally friendly products, and that vendors show that they will help us maintain the environment of the parks by clearing their litter. To say though, we don't yet set an absolute requirement that they only sell certain products from certain sources, or that they use electric vehicles. But I think that this is something we continue to look at as we go forward, and we may well start using those type of selection criteria more in future years. But we would also want to work with the vendors who work with us. We try to build a sort of productive relationship with them to help them sort of support their business and provide those facilities that they provide to people using the parks, and we want to work with them as we go forward.
This next question is about the expansion of Milton Keynes to 2050, and some of you may be aware that the council is currently consulting on some broad brush plans that are emerging for the way in which the city will grow and develop longer term. And we're inputting into those plans. At the moment we're producing what we're calling a proposition. It's our vision, if you like, for how the green infrastructure in Milton Keynes should develop. We've got some really key principles that we want to get across and get people behind. You'll not be surprised that one of those is that we would like to see all new green spaces connected together. That is one of the great beauties of our existing park network system, is that it is a network and that you can travel seamlessly from one part of the city through our lovely linear parks, and we want to make sure that the new areas of the city have that connectivity to the existing green space, but also connectivity to the wider countryside beyond Milton Keynes. That's really important to us. So we'll be making that point in our proposition document, which we will be launching in a few weeks' time.
Right, we've had a question from a resident saying he loves the way the trees are along the canal, but he's worried about some of the felling there recently and wonders why is this happening. Well, it's a good question. You know, the trees, and especially the tall Lombardy poplars that we see are quite iconic. But unfortunately, some of them are coming to an age. Poplars are traditionally quite fast growing, but also fast living, and they don't live up to grand old ages of 100 years or whatever. And so some of them are starting to deteriorate. We've got another issue that as they've grown taller, they do interfere with some of our neighbours, and and their properties. So we've taken a look at this and assessing each section by section, we will and have started a policy of removing some of those trees, but at the same time replanting those trees. At the moment we're planting those poplars that are close to houses with a variety of cherry. They're not quite so tall growing, and they're going to be less intrusive on those properties. The other issue we've got through Milton Keynes at the moment is there is a lot of disease associated with trees. We've got the various diseases associated with horse chestnut, and unfortunately we've now got ash dieback, and that's causing us a few issues. So we do have to go out and tackle these trees before they become a health and safety concern. But we do have replanting programs in place, and last year we planted 800 trees alone, and this year there will be a similar number as we remove some of those trees.
We've had a question from someone who noticed that there was a pond dug next to Brickhill Street, opposite Willen Lake South, earlier in the year, but then it was filled in, so they're obviously asking why that was done. Before I answer that question specifically, I'll just explain that we're working in partnership with an organisation called the South Midlands Newt Conservation Partnership, and they're using money that comes from the development process to work with landowners to improve conservation for great crested newts across the South Midlands. And we've done a couple of projects with them now, and the way it works is that they take money from developers through planning agreements where developers can't provide mitigation for ecology, for newts in particular, when they do their developments. They give these funds to the Newt Conservation Partnership, and they work with landowners to provide habitat on land away from development areas. And we've done a couple of projects with the Newt Conservation Partnership over the last couple of years, where they've funded the construction or digging out of some ponds, and they give us money each year thereafter to help us maintain those ponds and establish them to help protect and preserve the populations of great crested newts across the city. And the pond that was dug next to Brickhill Street earlier in the year was one of those ponds that came forward. Of course, when you dig a pond, you're not always sure what you're going to find. Most of Milton Keynes, and particularly that part of Milton Keynes down near Brickhill Street, the soils are impervious clays. So normally where you dig a hole, they will form a pond. However, in this rare occasion, when the pond was dug, they actually came across a seam of sand, which clearly meant that the pond was never going to retain water. They dug a bit deeper than usual to see if they could come across a clay layer, but it was making the pond so deep that they decided to abandon that, and that's why that pond was filled in, and another pond was constructed nearby, and thankfully in that one, just a few metres away, they dug down through clay, so we should get a good sustainable pond in that location.
We've had a question and a concern about large groups of people gathering during the various stages of lockdown, and one particular person was concerned about the Tree Cathedral. COVID-19 has been a challenge, I think, for the parks and the Parks Trust. We've seen more and more people gravitate towards the parks, which has been absolutely fantastic. But there have been elements where people have grouped together. And we've managed this as best we can. We've done some great work on our social media. Our rangers have been out talking to people, and most people do understand it and get it. Unfortunately, not everyone does. We can have the powers of persuasion and appeal to people's better nature, but we haven't got any statutory powers. So we can just further and encourage people, and if need be, get the police involved. But I've got to say, overall, 90–95% of all the people who have been using the parks have been using them fantastically well. You know, observing the social distancing, the 2 metres, respecting the open space, taking the litter home, and really sort of for us, it is really gratifying to see so many people at such a difficult time using the park so well. So thank you very much, everyone.